my family, we celebrate everything. Every year on Halloween, we dress up as a family. We have a birthday cake plate that you eat off of every year on your birthday. We write down things we're thankful for every year during Thanksgiving, and we even wear green from head to toe on St. Patrick's Day. Every day is a celebration in our family. And Christmas is the biggest of all celebrations. We go out to a Christmas tree farm and we cut down a tree and bring it into our house. We have inflatables that are 9 feet tall, and we embarrass the neighbors because our house is so bright. We have decorations in every room, upstairs and downstairs. It is a huge celebration. But let's be honest, this year it's been hard to celebrate anything. A lot of us have lost jobs or income. A lot of us have lost friends and family members. We're not able to gather with our friends and family members like we want to. When we think about Christmas and all that goes into it, a lot of us aren't getting the same Christmas experience that we normally get. It's been hard, it's been difficult, and all we think about sometimes is the darkness that's entered into the world in 2020. But tonight, on Christmas, we're reminded that light enters into the world. That when humanity seemed to be steeped in darkness and sin, that God entered the picture and brought light into the world. That through a baby, divinity meets humanity, and we can celebrate that God is going to win. That light wins, life wins, and death has no power over us. This is why, even in the middle of one of the toughest years of all of our lives, we can celebrate Christmas. So today, no matter where you are, Merry Christmas.
Hallelujah, Christ the Lord, we offer you glory. Hallelujah, Christ the Lord, we offer you glory. Hallelujah, Christ the Lord, we long for you.
At that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This was the first census taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. All returned to their own ancestral towns to register for this census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no lodging available for them.
Every great song begins with a great lyric. The writer of the song tries to hook us, to make us interested in the story from the very beginning. So when the Beatles sing, "Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away," we want to know more what those troubles are, right? When Elvis sings, "Wise men say, only fools rush in," well then what do wise people do if fools rush in? Or when we hear, "On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me," we want to know what the true love gave to her, although admittedly, we're not that interested by the fifth day. It just gets long on and on, right? The song goes. There's a great first line, a great first lyric to every great song, and there's a great first line to every great story. Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about the songs in the scriptures around the birth of this baby Jesus. Tonight's text is not a song, but it is one of the most memorable lines probably in all of the New Testament. It says, "It happened in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed." Now, believe it or not, those few lines tell us a lot about what's going to happen in the story, because it is a story about power and might and authority, even though we may not know that much about Caesar Augustus. His name's one of those that we run into every year, sometime at Christmas, and all we really know about him, for the most part, is that he was the guy who was in power when Jesus was born. But Mary and Joseph's experience of Caesar Augustus was very different. Caesar Augustus came to power when his uncle was assassinated. You may know this guy's name, Julius Caesar. He was not originally named Caesar Augustus. He had another name, but when he came to power, the Roman Senate thought it would be important for him to be elevated, so they named him Augustus, the August One, or the Exalted One. He was the one who would become the first emperor of Rome. Before, it had been a republic governed by many. Now it was governed by one powerful person, one emperor, and that emperor was him. He was so powerful that he wanted a month named after him, and so he had the Roman 6th month renamed August. We still use that, right? Just so happened that that was the month of a lot of his military conquests. Again, a name you may be familiar with, the conquering and defeat of Antony and Cleopatra. That was the Caesar Augustus that Mary and Joseph knew. He was the one that when he said move, you moved. There were no options, there were no get out of it, there were no substitutions. When the text tells us that Mary and Joseph had to go to Bethlehem, it meant they had to go to Bethlehem. Forbes magazine publishes a list of the most powerful people in the world every year. Of course, this year on that list are people, some names you might be familiar with: Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, Angela Merkel, who is the Chancellor of Germany, the General Secretary of China is on there, even though I wouldn't begin to try to pronounce his name. All very powerful people, 28 billionaires, many heads of state. If Caesar Augustus had been on that list, he'd be at the very top. In a world that loves to rank the power of our leaders, he was at the pinnacle. He was first. This story, from the very beginning, is a story about power and might and authority. But a little later in the story, it's about a different kind of king, about a different kind of power and might and authority. There's really nothing on this night that tells us that there was anything extraordinary about this baby. Sure, we'd seen some signs earlier if we read the story. The angel appeared to Mary and told her who the baby was going to be, and the angel appeared to Joseph and said, "Don't be afraid, this is going to be God's son." But other than that, nothing extraordinary. A baby born in an out-of-the-way place, in an out-of-the-way town, to very ordinary parents. Maybe the only thing society would have noted as powerful or authority related to this child was the fact that he was firstborn. In Jewish culture, the firstborn got a double inheritance because he'd have to take care of the family. He would at some point be in charge of the family. He would be the responsible one. So maybe a little bit of power and a little bit of might and a little bit of authority, but nothing compared to the one who was in charge of most of the known world at that time, Caesar Augustus. But time and distance have shown us that this baby is really the one who was powerful, who had the might, who had all authority, because Caesar Augustus ruled the world, but the scriptures tell us that this baby made the world and everything in it that Caesar ruled. Caesar Augustus came to power by threat and by the taking of life. This baby came by love and by the laying down of his life, first in the incarnation, this coming that we're talking about tonight, and then eventually on the cross. Caesar Augustus had a month named after him, but we order time based on when this child was born, BC, before Christ, AD, after his birth. The empire of Caesar Augustus lasted 1,500 years, and there are no more Romans as such in the world. But this baby, millions gather in his name every day and are part of a kingdom that will never end. Make no bones about it. This is a story about power and might and authority, and a baby who stands or sleeps in contrast to everything the world thinks is powerful, every expression of might and all authority. In a world where we like to rank our leaders, this baby lays aside all rank and becomes nothing. Why? Well, one of the early church fathers says that the reason that Jesus comes in poverty to an impoverished family in an out-of-the-way place is because if the baby had come to in a glorious birth to great wealth and fanfare, then maybe the world would have come to the conclusion that the way that transformation would happen would be from wealth or fame. If this baby had been born to a king, maybe the world would have come to the conclusion that transformation would come by power. If the baby had been born to a senator, maybe the world would have come to the conclusion that the world would be transformed by legislation. Yet time in history tells us that none of those things will bring about transformation. But because Jesus came as nothing to people who were nobody in an out-of-the-way, ordinary place, the only conclusion we can come to is that transformation is God's work. God intentionally steps into human history to change human history. He steps into the world to change the world. This is a story about power and might and authority of two very different kinds. Two kings, two stories, plus one, ours. We still live in a world that celebrates power and might and authority and encourages us to grab all we can and to make sure we protect ours and to establish our kingdom. But we will find that by time and distance that no matter how good our opening lines are to our story, the closing lines are always the same. That like Caesar Augustus, our kingdoms fade away and everything will be carried off by somebody else. But power and might and authority that this baby bring are a testimony to a God who has been from the beginning, is now, and forever will be, and whose grandest act was to come as a baby in order that he might bring those of us who were his enemies up close and make us his children. I don't know about you, that's not just a great story, that's the greatest story ever told. Merry Christmas.
Brown thought you'd come with a crown of gold, a string of pearls, the cashmere robe. We thought you'd clench an iron fist and rain like fire on the politics. But without a sword, no armored guard, but common born in mother's arms. The government now rests upon the shoulders of this baby son.